Sarah Archer had always been a woman of conviction, dedicated to her work and passionate about shaping young minds. A teacher by profession, she had devoted over 25 years of her life to the children of Salem School. As a young girl, Sarah's love for teaching was sparked early. She would gather her classmates together, teaching them new words and helping them study. Her dedication to learning and helping others never wavered. By the time she reached high school, she was not only the top student in every class, but also the one tutoring others. Her ability to explain complicated subjects in simple ways earned her admiration from both peers and teachers. She knew from an early age that teaching was her calling. After high school, Sarah pursued a degree in education, excelling in every class. Her passion for teaching led her to apply for a position at Salem School, where she was quickly hired at the age of 23. Her energy and enthusiasm made her the perfect candidate for the role of an elementary school teacher. She loved working with children, and soon, she was regarded as one of the best teachers the school had ever seen. Her students adored her for her patience and dedication, and their parents appreciated the personal attention she gave to each child. Sarah was not just teaching the subjects. She was molding future generations. Her impact was evident in every classroom she entered, and she took pride in the positive changes she saw in her students. But Sarah's journey wasn't without its challenges. As much as her parents had supported her dreams, they had always pushed her to aim higher, to strive for a better-paying career in academia. They wanted her to be a professor, to earn the prestige and financial security that came with such a position. However, Sarah felt drawn to the elementary level, where she believed she could make the most impact. The foundation of a child's education, she believed, was the most crucial stage, and she wanted to be the one to shape it. Despite her parents' objections, she followed her heart and began her career as an elementary school teacher. In the beginning, her choice seemed to be the right one. Sarah found deep fulfillment in her work. The smiles of her students when they finally grasped a concept, the gratitude of parents who saw their children thriving, it was everything she had ever wanted. Her days were spent teaching, and when school ended, she spent even more time organizing study sessions, helping struggling students, and creating ways to make learning more accessible. The small salary she received never bothered her because she found purpose in the work itself. Sarah was more than willing to sacrifice comfort for the joy of teaching, and her dedication paid off. But as time passed, cracks began to appear. Her work consumed her. Sarah put in long hours, often neglecting her own needs in favor of her students. She had little time for herself and even less for a personal life. She had a few relationships, but they all ended in heartbreak. Her partner, Andrew, a man she loved dearly, had grown resentful of her devotion to her students. He often complained that she spent more time with them than with him, and the strain led to their breakup. Her parents, who had always hoped she would aim for a more prestigious career, were disappointed in her choices. They didn't understand why she would choose a job that paid so little when she could have easily had a career as a professor. But to Sarah, the joy of teaching children outweighed all the materialistic concerns of the world. As the years wore on, Sarah's passion never faded, but the toll of her relentless dedication began to show. At 50, Sarah was still teaching. still giving everything to her students, but now the school board had other plans. Despite her decades of service and the positive impact she had made, Sarah was told it was time to go. The school wanted a younger, fresher face. Sarah was dismissed after more than 25 years of loyal service. The decision broke her heart. She had poured her life into the school and the children, and now she felt as though it had all been for nothing. Without a job and with no savings to fall back on, Sarah found herself at a crossroads. The security of her teaching career had vanished, and she was left with nothing but the memories of her days in the classroom. With nowhere else to turn, she moved back to her hometown, hoping to start over. But life had not been kind. She couldn't find steady work and was forced to take on odd jobs just to survive. Sarah ended up cleaning homes and, on occasion, searching through trash for aluminum cans to sell. The woman who had once been a respected teacher now found herself scavenging for scraps. The harsh reality of Sarah's new life hit her hard. She had gone from being a cherished educator to a woman struggling to make ends meet. But despite everything, Sarah refused to let go of the hope that one day things would change. She continued to hold on to her memories of teaching, the pride she once felt, and the belief that there was still a way out of the despair she was living in. It was a cold morning when Sarah, tired and disheartened, trudged through the grimy streets, dragging her worn-out bag of garbage behind her. The sun had barely risen, and the sky was a dull gray. But Sarah's routine had long since hardened her to the bleakness around her. She had learned to focus on the task at hand, blocking out everything else: the biting cold, the stares from passers-by, and the endless feeling of isolation. The Mango Cafe, a popular spot for the wealthy, was just a few buildings away, and it was there she had been searching for aluminum cans every morning. The cafe's workers would always dump out their trash around this time, and Sarah had learned that the cans were usually in good condition. She could sell them for a bit of money to buy food, something that had become essential for her survival. Sarah had once had pride in her work, in the joy she found in teaching. But that was long gone now. She wasn't just searching for cans. She was searching for a way to hold on to something resembling dignity. The weight of her failure as a teacher, her inability to provide for herself, and the harsh reality of her life weighed heavily on her. And so, day after day, she collected the cans, each one a small victory in a world that seemed to have forgotten her. On this particular morning, Sarah was bent over, carefully picking out cans from a heap of discarded trash, when she heard a voice behind her. "Don't come too close," a man barked. "You stink." She turned around to see one of the workers from the Mango Cafe, a man in a crisp black uniform, wrinkling his nose in disgust. He was standing with his hand held up in front of his face as if to shield himself from the smell. Sarah could feel the sting of his words. She had known that people would look at her differently now, but the harshness of his tone made the truth of her situation even clearer. "I'm just looking for the cans," Sarah said quietly, trying to ignore the judgment in his voice. Her stomach rumbled loudly, and she tried not to let the man see how much it hurt her. It wasn't just that she was ashamed, it was that she had never imagined her life would come to this. She had always imagined she would be surrounded by children, teaching them, shaping them into better people. Instead, she was here, humiliated, scavenging for scraps. The man, seemingly uninterested in her response, snapped again. "I'll drop the bag here," he said. "You can come get it later." He turned his back on her, not even waiting for her to thank him. "And get a bath," he added, his voice dripping with disdain. "You stink worse than a garbage truck. In the summer." Sarah stood still for a moment, her eyes fixed on the ground as she let his words sink in. He didn't even consider the circumstances, the fact that she had been trying to survive, that she had no other options. He didn't care that she had once been someone who commanded respect. In his eyes, she was just another beggar, just another piece of trash. Once he was gone, Sarah walked over to the pile of garbage where he had dropped the bag. There, amidst the food scraps and broken bottles, were the aluminum cans she had been hoping for. She wasn't bothered by the fact that they had been thrown out. They were still worth something, and that was all that mattered. She quickly packed the cans into her bag, pushing aside the leftover food and wrappers as she did so. To the walk to. The recycling center was long, but Sarah kept her focus on the goal. She needed money, not just for food, but to get by, to survive. Her stomach twisted in hunger, but she didn't allow herself to think about it too much. It wasn't the first time she had gone without food, and it likely wouldn't be the last. When you didn't have much, you learned to live with it. Upon reaching the recycling center, Sarah was greeted by a young man behind the counter who wrinkled his nose at her but didn't say anything. He was polite enough not to comment on the smell, but Sarah could tell he was doing his best to hide his discomfort. "What do you have for me today?" he asked, already eyeing her garbage bag. "I've got some cans," Sarah said, her voice thick with exhaustion. She opened the bag, and the man began to inspect the contents. He looked at the cans critically, his face blank. "They're not all in good condition," he said flatly, causing Sarah's heart to sink. She had tried her best to make sure they were in decent shape, but the man was already scrutinizing them. He made it clear that she wasn't going to get much for them, only offering her $2, a fraction of what she had hoped for. Sarah didn't argue. It wasn't worth it. She took the money, even though it was less than she needed, and walked out of the center. Her stomach growled again, but there was nothing she could do about it now. She would have to make do with what little she had. As she trudged home, Sarah couldn't help but think about how far she had fallen. Once, she had been a teacher, surrounded by the admiration of her students. Now she was just another face in the crowd, scraping by, unnoticed and forgotten. Her day had started with hope, a simple search for cans that could make her a few dollars. But now, she felt the weight of her situation more than ever. The world had moved on, and Sarah was stuck, unable to move forward. She was a woman, caught between two lives, the one she had once had, full of purpose and passion, and the one she was now living, filled with shame and struggle. The next morning, Sarah woke with a feeling of deep sadness that settled in her chest. The previous day had been a blow to her pride and dignity. After the humiliating encounter at the Mango Cafe, she had returned home with empty hands and an aching heart. The man who had scolded her and tossed her garbage bag aside made her feel like an unwanted nuisance. But it wasn't just the man's harsh words that hurt. It was the realization that she had nothing left. Her life, once filled with purpose as a teacher, had now been reduced to searching through trash just to survive. For a long time, she had been in denial about how far her life had fallen, but the events of the past few days had shattered that illusion. She sat in her small, dingy apartment, staring at the walls that seemed to close in on her. The reality of her situation was undeniable. The lack of stability in her life weighed heavily on her shoulders. She had no job, no money, and no support system. The friends she once had drifted away, and her family was gone, leaving her to fend for herself. She had always been strong, always found a way to push through, but now she felt broken, exhausted, and hopeless. Just when Sarah thought she could sink no lower, there was a knock at her door. She stood up, her feet feeling heavy as she walked toward the entrance. When she opened the door, her eyes widened in disbelief. Standing on her doorstep was none other than the man from the Mango Cafe, the one who had treated her so poorly just the day before. His posture was different now, no longer harsh and judgmental, but instead, he seemed almost apologetic. "Good morning, Miss Archer," he said, his voice soft. "I'm sorry for what happened yesterday." Sarah blinked, still processing the sight of him standing there. Her initial instinct was to shut the door, to push him away, but something in his eyes stopped her. He wasn't the same man she had encountered at the restaurant. There was a sincerity in his voice that gave her pause. "I know I've wronged you, and I need to make it right," he continued, stepping forward just slightly. "Please hear me out." She hesitated, but then stepped aside to let him in. As he entered, he explained that he was Brad Minar, the general, manager of the Mango Cafe. He admitted that his actions the day before had been unforgivable. He had been under immense pressure with the restaurant's opening event and had let his frustrations spill over onto her. He acknowledged that he had treated her terribly and said he was ashamed of his behavior. "I didn't realize how much I hurt you until I saw the video online," he confessed. "The incident went viral, and it's causing a lot of backlash against our CEO, Mr. Ambrose." Sarah wasn't sure what to make of this sudden change in Brad. She had no reason to trust him, and her pride wanted to turn him away. But there was something in his voice that suggested he genuinely regretted his actions. Brad continued, explaining that Joseph Ambrose, the CEO of Mango Cafe, had seen the video and was horrified by what had happened. "He wants to make things right. He wants to offer you compensation for the way you were treated." Sarah frowned, uncertain of his intentions. Compensation after everything that happened? She was skeptical. It seemed too easy, too convenient. But she was also hungry, physically and emotionally. A part of her wanted to believe that this could be the end of the pain, the start of something better. Brad gave her a reassuring smile, but Sarah's heart still felt heavy. It wasn't about the money or the compensation. It was about her dignity. Her self-respect had been trampled on, and no amount of money could ever replace the value of what she had lost. Still, as she stood there, she realized that it wasn't her pride she needed to protect. It was her survival. Maybe this was the opportunity she had been waiting for, the chance to move beyond the trash piles and the judgments. She agreed, reluctantly, to meet Joseph Ambrose. Brad promised to arrange everything. As he turned to leave, Sarah couldn't help but feel conflicted. She wasn't one to accept handouts, and certainly not from someone who had treated her so cruelly. But in her situation, what other choice did she have? She had nothing left to lose. Later that day, Sarah made her way to the Mango Cafe's headquarters, unsure of what to expect. The luxurious building was a stark contrast to her world. She passed through the ornate lobby, surrounded by polished floors and expensive decor. It felt surreal, a world she had never been a part of, a world that had always seemed so far away. Brad led her to the back of the building, where she was introduced to Joseph Ambrose. When their eyes met, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had seen him before. He was the same boy she had taught years ago. Joseph was now a grown man, dressed in a sharp suit, exuding confidence and success. But as their eyes locked, Sarah saw something familiar in his gaze. It was as if, despite all the years that had passed, he still remembered her. The realization hit her hard. This wasn't just a meeting for compensation. This was something more. It was the beginning of a reunion long overdue, and it would change everything. But at that moment, Sarah couldn't yet grasp the full impact of this encounter. She was too caught up in the chaos of her emotions, her pride, her bitterness, her desperation. Little did she know that this meeting would spark a series of events that would restore her hope and completely reshape her future. The day Sarah arrived at the Mango Cafe's headquarters, she felt both out of place and overwhelmed. The sleek building, gleaming with modern elegance, stood in stark contrast to the life she had been leading, one where survival was a constant struggle. She followed Brad, trying to keep her head down and avoid attracting attention as she made her way through the bustling headquarters. The polished floors, immaculate offices, and expensive decor all seemed foreign to her. She had never been in such an environment, and it felt like a world she was never meant to be a part of. But here she was, walking through its doors for the first time, unsure of what would happen next. As she entered the conference room, Sarah's gaze immediately fell on the man sitting at the far end of the table. Brad had told her that the CEO, Joseph Ambrose, was the one who wanted to meet her and make things right. She had no idea what to expect from this powerful businessman, but she wasn't prepared for the overwhelming sense of familiarity that hit her when she saw him. Joseph. Ambrose looked exactly like the boy she had once taught at Salem School. He was no longer the 10-year-old child she had known, struggling to find his way, but a grown man who exuded confidence and authority. But as Sarah locked eyes with him, it was as if time had folded in on itself. She saw in his gaze something she hadn't expected, something warm, something personal. This wasn't just the CEO of a successful business. This was Joseph, the boy she had cared for all those years ago. She stood frozen for a moment, trying to process the unexpected wave of emotions that rushed over her. How could this be? How could he have grown into such a powerful figure? She had always believed in him, even when he was a difficult child, and seeing him now, successful, confident, and full of life, was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. She wanted to cry, but she held herself together. The years had passed, but it felt like only yesterday she had last seen him, a troubled child whose life she had tried to help steer in the right direction. Joseph, too, seemed to be caught off guard by the meeting. He stood from his chair, his face softening as he recognized her. "Miss Archer," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "I can't believe it's you." Sarah's heart fluttered and her mouth went dry. She had never imagined that their paths would cross again, let alone in this grand, polished setting. There was so much she wanted to say, so many questions running through her mind. What had happened to him? How had he turned out to be the successful man he was now? Joseph? Sarah's voice trembled slightly as she spoke, her eyes searching, his face for answers. "Is it really you?" Joseph nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It's me, Miss Archer. I've never forgotten you, not for a single day." His words struck her deeply, and in that moment, she realized how much of an impact she had had on his life. She had always known that he was a special child, that he had potential, but hearing him say that he had carried her influence with him, all these years brought tears to her eyes. She had poured so much of herself into her students, but she never imagined that the love and care she had given Joseph would come back to her in such a powerful way. Joseph went on to explain how he had never been able to forget her and how, as he grew older, he often thought about the kindness she had shown him. He told Sarah about his difficult upbringing, how his parents had neglected him, and how, after his father had taken him away from her, he had been lost. But it was the words she had spoken to him, words of encouragement and belief, that had stayed with him, guiding him through the darkest moments of his life. "I didn't have anyone else, Miss Archer," Joseph confessed. "But you believed in me when no one else did. You gave me the strength to keep going." Sarah was overwhelmed by his words, unable to hold back her tears any longer. She had never expected this kind of recognition, especially from someone she had helped so long ago. It was the kind of validation she had never received from her own family, the kind she had been seeking for so long. And now, here it was, coming from the one person whose life she had touched in such a profound way. Joseph continued, explaining how, after years of searching for her, he had finally found her through the viral video of the incident at the Mango Cafe's launch. He had been horrified when he saw how she was treated and knew he had to make it right. That's when he reached out to Brad and asked him to find her. "I've made a lot of mistakes in my life," Joseph admitted. "But the one thing I will never forget is how you changed my life. I want to make it up to you." His sincerity hit Sarah like a wave. For so many years, she had felt like she was forgotten, like her sacrifices had gone unnoticed. But here was Joseph, her former student, now a successful man, acknowledging everything she had done for him. Brad, who had been quietly standing by, finally spoke up. "Mr. Ambrose wants to compensate you for what happened, Miss Archer. He wants to make sure you are treated with the respect you deserve." Sarah shook her head slightly, still processing the shock of seeing Joseph again. "I don't need money or gifts," she said, her voice full of emotion. "I just needed to know that someone remembered me, that what I did mattered." Joseph stepped closer to her, his eyes locked onto hers. "It mattered more than you'll ever know," he said. "And I promise you, Miss Archer, I won't let you go without making things right." At that moment, Sarah realized that this wasn't just about compensation. It wasn't about money or gifts. It was about redemption. It was about reconnecting with the past, healing old wounds, and finding a new path forward. Joseph had found his way to success, and now he was bringing Sarah along for the journey. They weren't just reconnecting, they were rebuilding their lives together. The morning Sarah stepped into Joseph's world was nothing short of surreal. She had lived through years of hardship and struggle, holding on to the belief that life could somehow improve. Now, walking beside Joseph Ambrose, the former student she had once helped, she felt both awe and disbelief. Everything felt so different, too polished, too extravagant, and she struggled to shake the feeling that she didn't belong in this world. But Joseph was insistent, leading her through the luxurious streets, his presence calm and reassuring as he reassured her time and time again that she would be fine. The car ride was quiet. The only sounds were the low hum of the engine and the soft rustling of the leaves outside. Sarah's thoughts were a whirlwind. This wasn't how she'd imagined a reunion with her former student would unfold. She hadn't expected anything beyond an apology, but this was something entirely different. Joseph had asked her to trust him, and despite her deep-rooted skepticism, she felt a small flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, things were turning around for her. When they pulled up in front of a house that could only be described as magnificent, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The house was nothing like her crumbling apartment. It was a beautiful two-story home with sprawling gardens, a pristine driveway, and large windows that let the sunlight stream through the rooms. Sarah blinked, certain that there was some mistake. This was far too grand to be meant for her. She had spent years living with the bare minimum, and now she was standing in front of something that felt like an impossible dream. Joseph turned to her, a soft smile on his face. "It's yours," he said gently, his voice sincere. "This house, I've had it bought and paid for in full, Sarah. It's yours. No more living in that cramped apartment. No more struggling." Sarah felt the weight of his words pressed down on her. She couldn't believe it. A house? For her. It was almost too much to take in. She stood there for a moment, her mind racing as she tried to process what he was saying. Was this real? Was this really happening? She had spent so many years scraping by, just trying to survive, that the idea of having something like this, a home, a place of her own, seemed utterly impossible. Joseph stepped out of the car and walked over to her. He gently took her hand and guided her to the front door. "Come on," he said with a reassuring smile. "Let me show you inside." As they entered the house, Sarah was overwhelmed by the beauty and warmth that surrounded her. The walls were painted in soft, welcoming colors, and the furniture was elegant, yet cozy. The entire space exuded comfort, and for the first time in years, Sarah felt a sense of peace wash over her. This wasn't just a house. It was a new beginning. She could hardly believe that this was happening to her. They toured the house together, room by room. Each space was carefully designed with Sarah in mind. There was a spacious living room with large windows that overlooked the garden, a beautiful kitchen that made her feel like she was in a dream, and a bedroom that seemed to call out to her with its inviting warmth. But the real surprise came when they reached the closet. Joseph opened the door to reveal an impressive array of clothes, shoes, and bags. Everything a woman could need. "I hope they're your style," he said with a chuckle, clearly pleased with his choice. "But they're yours, Sarah. All of them." Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the sight of the elegant clothing. For a moment, she didn't know how to react. She had never owned anything like this before. She had always worn second-hand clothes, never caring much about her appearance. But now, here she was, surrounded by the kind of luxury she had never imagined. It was almost too much. I can't accept this," she said, her voice trembling. "This is too much. I don't deserve it." Joseph smiled, his expression kind. "You deserve everything, Sarah. You've given your entire life to helping others. Now it's time for you to have something in return. This house, these things, they're just a small token of my gratitude for everything you've done for me. You don't have to worry about anything anymore. This is your home now. It's yours to enjoy." Sarah's chest tightened as tears filled her eyes. She had never expected this. She had never expected anyone to show her this kind of care, especially after everything she had gone through. She felt undeserving, unworthy of such generosity. But as she stood there, looking around the home that Joseph had gifted her, something inside her shifted. Maybe she did deserve this. Maybe, after all these years of sacrifice and hardship, it was time for her to receive something back. Joseph watched her carefully, his eyes filled with understanding. "You don't have to thank me," he said quietly. "This is just the beginning. You've spent your life giving to others, and now it's time to take something for yourself. This house is just the start. I want you to live comfortably now, Sarah. You deserve it." She nodded, still in awe of the kindness he had shown her. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a sense of hope. The life she had lived, one filled with sacrifice, loneliness, and struggle, was no longer the life she had to lead. Joseph had given her a fresh start, and though she didn't know where this new journey would take her, she felt a spark of excitement deep within her. She was ready for this new chapter, ready to live with dignity again. As Sarah settled into her new home, Joseph's words resonated in her heart. She didn't know how long it would take to heal from the years of pain, but she knew that with this fresh start, she could begin to rebuild. And for the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to believe that life could be better, that she deserved to live it fully. Months had passed since Sarah had moved into her new home, and the life she had once known seemed like a distant memory. The house, which had initially overwhelmed her, had slowly become a sanctuary, a place of peace and warmth that she had never imagined possible. Every morning, as the sunlight streamed through the windows and warmed the rooms, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. She no longer woke up to the crushing weight of financial struggles or the constant worry of where her next meal would come from. For the first time in years, she woke up feeling hopeful. Sarah's transformation wasn't just about her new home or the luxury that now surrounded her. It was about reclaiming a part of herself she had long forgotten. The joy she had once found in teaching, in helping others, began to return. She still thought about her old students, the ones who had once depended on her guidance and support, and it occurred to her that she might be able to give back in some meaningful way. One afternoon, as she sat at the kitchen table sipping her coffee, Sarah reflected on everything Joseph had done for her. His kindness had not only provided her with a new home, but it had also restored her dignity and confidence. The thought that someone, especially a former student, had remembered her and wanted to help in such a profound way left her speechless. She had never expected to be seen, to be valued, let alone to receive so much. But now, sitting in this beautiful home, Sarah realized she wanted to do something meaningful in return. She wasn't content just being the recipient of kindness. She wanted to contribute, to make a difference in her own way. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. Joseph had visited her a few weeks after she settled in, with an idea that left Sarah both surprised and touched. He wanted to start a new initiative, a school based on the values she had once instilled in her students. It would be a place where children who struggled in traditional educational settings could receive the kind of attention and care Sarah had given Joseph all those years ago. Joseph had thought about it long and hard, and he knew that Sarah was the perfect person to lead this vision. "I want to create something lasting, Sarah," Joseph had said, his voice sincere. "A school where teachers like you can truly make a difference. You have the heart, the passion, and the experience. You're the one who can lead this." Sarah had been speechless at first, unsure of how to respond. She hadn't taught in years, and the idea of running a school, after all the heartbreak and disappointment of her previous teaching career, seemed like an overwhelming task. But as Joseph continued to speak, Sarah began to see the potential. This wasn't just any school. It was an opportunity to create a community of learning, where every child was valued and understood. It was a chance to give children the foundation they needed to succeed, just as she had once done for Joseph. It was a way for her to return to her true calling, but with a new purpose. One that didn't just focus on academics, but on nurturing the whole child. With Joseph's support, the idea for Sarah's place, a school where children could receive personalized education and care, began to take shape. It wasn't long before Sarah became fully invested in the project. Her past struggles had given her a unique perspective on what children needed, especially those who didn't fit the traditional mold. Sarah understood that learning wasn't just about memorizing facts or following a strict curriculum. It was about fostering a love of learning, instilling self-confidence, and providing the emotional support children needed to succeed in life. Sarah poured her heart into the planning and development of the school. She worked closely with Joseph, who brought in his resources and experience, ensuring that the school would be everything she had always dreamed of for her students. They hired a team of like-minded educators who shared Sarah's vision, and together, they created a learning environment that was warm, welcoming, and inclusive. When the school finally opened its doors, it wasn't just a place for education. It was a safe space for children to grow, learn, and develop into well-rounded individuals. Sarah's passion and dedication were evident in every corner of the school, From the colorful classrooms to the nurturing atmosphere that greeted every child who walked through the doors. She could see the difference she was making in each student's life, and it filled her with an immense sense of fulfillment. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again, like the teacher she had always aspired to be. As the weeks went by, Sarah found herself revitalized by the work she was doing. She was no longer consumed by the weight of her past struggles. Instead, she was focused on her students, her new life, and the positive change she was bringing to the world. The joy of teaching returned in full force, and she found herself spending countless hours with her students, helping them overcome challenges, celebrating their victories, and watching them grow. Joseph, too, had found fulfillment in the success of the school. Though he had never expected to take on such a project, seeing Sarah thrive in her new role brought him a deep sense of satisfaction. He knew that he had done more than just give her a house. He had helped her find her purpose again. And in doing so, he had created something far more meaningful than any business venture could offer. Sarah's place became more than just a school. It became a symbol of hope and second chances. It was a testament to the power of kindness, the impact of a single teacher, and the transformative nature of giving someone the opportunity to rebuild. And as Sarah stood in the school's hallway, watching her students interact and learn, she knew that her life had come full circle. She had gone from being lost and broken to finding her true calling once more. With Joseph's help, she had rediscovered her passion and was now changing the lives of children in ways she had always dreamed of. For Sarah, this was just the beginning of her new life, one where her heart could finally heal and where her love for teaching would continue to inspire generations to come. Months had passed since the opening of Sarah's place, and Sarah couldn't help but marvel at how her life had changed. What had started as a dream, a small idea Joseph Ambrose had presented to her, had blossomed into something extraordinary. Sarah had never imagined that she would be standing in front of a classroom full of eager young faces once again. But now, here she was, overseeing a school that embodied everything she had once believed in: personalized education, nurturing children, and creating an environment where every child could thrive. Sarah stood at the front of her new school, looking out over the bright faces of her students, and felt an overwhelming sense of pride. This was her life now, and it felt right. The transformation in her was not just about the physical space, the home Joseph had given her, or the clothes, or the material wealth. It was about the deep sense of fulfillment that came from returning to her true calling. She had once given up everything for teaching, and now, after years of struggle, she had been given the chance to do it again, but this time on her own terms. When she first started, Sarah had feared that she might be too old, too disconnected from the new methods of education, and too distant from the life she had once led. But in the months since the school opened, those fears had faded away. Sarah had found her rhythm again. The children at Sarah's place were different from the students she had once taught. Many of them had struggled in traditional school systems and had been cast aside. But here, at Sarah's place, they were given a second chance. Sarah had always known that education wasn't just about textbooks and grades. It was about nurturing the whole child. She focused not only on their academic achievements, but on their emotional growth and self-confidence. She could see the difference every day. The shy students, the ones who had been afraid to speak up or ask questions, were now participating eagerly in class. The kids who had once felt like failures began to believe in their abilities. It was as if they were finally being given the space to blossom, to learn in a way that felt right for them. Sarah's teaching style had always been one that encouraged questions, creativity, and understanding, not rote memorization or standard tests. She encouraged her students to explore, to find what they were passionate about, and to take pride in their progress. Joseph had been her rock throughout this process. Although his role in the school was more behind the scenes, helping with funding and logistics, he was always present, offering guidance and support when needed. He would often visit the school, sitting in on classes, speaking with the staff, and sharing his thoughts on how they could continue to grow and improve. Sarah had been hesitant at first about mixing business and personal life, but Joseph had proven time and again that he was genuinely invested in her vision. He wasn't just trying to make a profit. He truly cared about the students and the impact the school could have on their lives. The teachers at Sarah's place were also exceptional. They shared Sarah's belief that every child was capable of greatness, and they worked hard to create an environment where each student could reach their full potential. Sarah had taken great care in hiring a team that was both experienced and compassionate, ensuring that they had a shared commitment to the values of the school. Together, they had created a supportive and dynamic community, one where the children felt safe, valued, and heard. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah found herself growing more attached to her new role as the head of the school. Every challenge she faced, whether it was a tough day with a student or a logistical problem with the school's operations, felt manageable now. She had learned to ask for help when she needed it, and she had learned to trust her instincts. Her years of experience as a teacher had prepared her for this role in ways she hadn't even realized. And with the support of Joseph and her incredible team, Sarah knew that the school would continue to thrive. The students, too, had flourished in the environment Sarah had created. They were not just learning academics, they were learning life, skills, resilience, and empathy. Sarah would often find herself moved by the small victories that, to some, might have seemed insignificant. A child who had once struggled to read now picked up books with enthusiasm. A student who had been afraid to speak in front of the class now confidently gave presentations. These were the moments that made all the hard work worthwhile. The joy of seeing her students grow, both academically and emotionally, was something Sarah hadn't experienced in years, and it was this joy that filled her heart every day. One afternoon, as Sarah sat in her office reviewing student progress reports, she found herself reflecting on everything she had accomplished. It had been a long and difficult journey, but she had found her purpose again. She had gone from being a teacher who had lost her way to a woman who was making a difference in the lives of children. Sarah's place wasn't just a school. It was a community, a family, a place where everyone could thrive, no matter their background or challenges. As she watched her students interact with one another, laughing and learning, Sarah couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. She had been given a second chance at life, and she was determined to make the most of it. Joseph had changed her life in ways she could never have imagined, and now, With the success of Sarah's place, she felt like she was changing the lives of her students in return. For Sarah, this was more than just a career. It was a calling. And as the days went by, she knew that she had found her true place in the world. As the months rolled by, Sarah's place became more than just a school. It became a symbol of hope, second chances, and the power of love. The small, vibrant institution had quickly grown into a community where children, parents, and teachers came together to create a nurturing environment for learning. Sarah had poured everything into it, her heart, her soul, and her decades of experience as a teacher. But as the school flourished, Sarah's journey of healing and rediscovery continued. In the quiet moments of reflection, Sarah found herself thinking back to the days before Joseph had found her. Back then, her life had been marked by loneliness, disappointment, and unfulfilled dreams. She had been consumed by the struggle of survival, picking up scraps where she could, just to make ends meet. Her former life as a teacher seemed so distant, a faded memory of something she had once loved deeply. But Joseph's intervention had restored her hope, not only by giving her a new home and a fresh start, but by reminding her of what she was truly capable of, what she was meant to do. It wasn't just about running a school or earning a living anymore. It was about fulfilling a purpose. Sarah had been given the chance to give back, to continue her work with children, but this time, it was on her terms. She wasn't bound by outdated methods of teaching or stifling bureaucracy. Instead, she had built Sarah's place on the belief that every child deserved to be seen, valued, and loved, regardless of their background or struggles. The impact of Sarah's work didn't go unnoticed. Parents spoke often of the difference they saw in their children after they started attending Sarah's place. Children who had once been labeled as troublemakers, slow learners, or misunderstood were now thriving. Some had learned to read, others had built confidence in their abilities, and all of them had learned that failure didn't define them. In Sarah's classroom, there were no failures, just opportunities to learn, grow, and try again. Sarah had become a beacon of light for so many children who had once felt like they had no place in the world. Her work was not only transforming the children's lives, but was slowly healing her own. Sarah had begun to see herself not just as a teacher, but as a mentor, a guide, and even a mother figure to many of her students. It was a role she embraced wholeheartedly, even though it was not without challenges. The emotional toll of caring so deeply for her students, some of whom came from broken homes or difficult circumstances, could be exhausting. But every time a child smiled, every time a parent expressed gratitude, Sarah felt her heart swell with love and pride. These were the moments that made it all worth it. Joseph had also played an instrumental role in her healing process. Though his role in the school was more focused on the business side of things, Sarah knew that he was just as invested in the success of Sarah's place as she was. His unwavering support, both emotional and financial, allowed her to focus on what she did best, teaching. But their relationship had deepened beyond just business partners. Joseph had become a close friend, someone who understood her struggles and her triumphs, and someone who genuinely cared about her well-being. She had never expected to find such a strong bond with someone, let alone someone who had once been her student. But Joseph had always been different. He had never forgotten her kindness, her belief in him when no one else did, and now he was helping her fulfill her own dreams. One peaceful Sunday afternoon, as Sarah sat in her small garden, watching the flowers bloom in the spring sunshine, she received a call from Joseph. He was at the school's headquarters, and he wanted to talk. Sarah was accustomed to these phone calls, which usually revolved around school-related matters, but today felt different. When Joseph spoke, his voice carried a note of excitement. "We've done it, Sarah," Joseph said, his words full of warmth. "The school is growing, and it's starting to get noticed. People are talking about it. We've created something beautiful here, something that will last." Sarah felt a tear slip down her cheek as she listened to his words. She had been so focused on the day-to-day tasks of running the school that she hadn't truly realized the scope of what they had accomplished. They had built more than a school. They had built a legacy, a place where children could learn, grow, and thrive. A place where love, support, and dedication were at the core of everything they did. As Sarah looked around her garden, at the blooming flowers and the life that had once seemed so unattainable, she realized that she had found peace. Her life had come full circle. From the days of struggling to survive, to the feeling of being invisible and forgotten, to now, standing at the helm of a school that was changing lives. Sarah's heart swelled with gratitude for everything Joseph had given her, for everything she had been able to give back, and for the profound sense of fulfillment that now filled her days. Later that week, at the school's annual celebration, Sarah stood on the stage, surrounded by her students, parents, and staff. The applause was deafening as she was recognized for her leadership, her vision, and her dedication. But in that moment, Sarah didn't feel the need to take credit for herself. She felt a deep sense of pride in the community they had built together. Sarah had become more than just a teacher. She had become a symbol of hope, resilience, and love. The legacy she had once dreamed of leaving in the classroom had now become a living, breathing reality. And as Sarah stood there, looking out at the faces of the children she had helped nurture, she knew that her work would continue, that her legacy would endure long after she was gone. Her love for teaching, her belief in every child's potential, and her unwavering commitment to making a difference would live on in Sarah's place for generations to come.